If Red Bull continues the complete domination that I've seen...
Shut the fuck up.
Literally, you're so annoying.
Who let this girl in here?
Okay. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grid Gals. This is episode 25 and we are coming to you live after the Dutch Grand Prix. I would just like to say, ladies, it's so good to be back after summer break and you gals getting COVID, which I was very sad that you had to record without me. I mean, sad that you guys got COVID, but if you're a longtime fan, you know that I got it back in late March, early April, and had to miss a couple recordings because of that. It also was a bummer to, miss more because you two had it and, you were infectious and could record without me, which, don't get me wrong, I'm very sad that you ladies got it. I'm glad that you're feeling better. It's wonderful to see you now, but I'm so glad we're back as a trio. I miss my gals.
It's great to have you back.
It's not the same when it's not the three of us. I feel like we still do a good job. It's just, the dynamic is with the three of us.
The vibes are different.
Yeah, very different vibes.
Well, and, here I was listening to the recording last week, and I'm like, I know why I can't be there. It's a very good reason, but I had so much to say. I was watching Spa, not really actually about the race, as you guys covered. I had a lot to say about quali. We don't need to get into that. New week, new race, new update.
I do have something to say about Spa.
What do you have to say about Spa?
I watched an analysis. It wasn't Max's tear-off that got into Leclerc's
car. Of course.
Jesus.
This is what you want to follow up on.
Oh my God. Okay.
Can you just guess one driver that you think it could be besides Max?
Russell?
It's Latifi, isn't it?
It's Stroll.
Oh! Even better! Even better!
I mean, at this point, how many more strikes do we have to have against the man? Still
twist my arm. I'll yell at Stroll.
I feel like it was appropriate, and I feel like you need to, clear the air about it.
Thank you for the follow-up.
You're so welcome.
No, that's that's worth it. Thank you. I do think that we have a lot to talk about in terms of not only the Dutch GP, but F1 gossip in general. It's been a spicy week.
Mm-hmm. The rumor mill has just been churning. I feel like for the last 6 weeks, just pure rumors, and I don't know what to believe, and I don't know what not to believe, but Catherine, I think you have I have
a full list.
Yeah, because some of them, they're not rumors anymore.
Yeah, solidly confirmed rumor, Piastri to McLaren.
Yep.
Which kind of closes the loop of the whole Ricciardo, Alpine, McLaren story.
That was a big piece of drama. Not only just the team switching, but the lawsuits, just the way it unfolded.
Yeah, and they had lawyers review the contracts and decide that Piastri's contract with McLaren stands, which he signed July 4th, which was obviously a very long time ago.
You're kidding.
A full week before Danny Rick came out and put that Instagram post up.
Jack, I thought you knew.
Well, I purposely stayed away because
Fair.
Catherine wanted to...
I wanted the full reaction.
The good gut reaction.
So it's not that I don't keep tabs. I just have been purposely staying away so that I can have a live reaction, for our listeners here.
I'm sorry.
I feel for him, that entire long post that he had, I feel like he must have been completely blindsided, which I can understand why McLaren would make moves to replace him. Clearly, it's just not a good fit. Partially, too, maybe Ricciardo's lost a little of his steam. Who's to say, right? I think very clearly, McLaren and Ricciardo just don't mix well. The new car, he has a lot of difficulties with it, sure. But I think that's just heartbreaking to see them them go behind his back.
Yeah, they're not going to tell him, I understand why they didn't. but it still just sucks. I'm pretty sure it was after, like, what, Silverstone it must have been, which he, like, had a pretty poor performance then.
Yeah, it was a tough race.
It's one of those, like, it's not even the fact of the matter, it's how it happened, right? It's how it unfolded, it was how it was communicated, and it just feels like salt in the wound to learn that after the fact.
And watching the interviews, I know we talked about it last time, like, obviously when Danny Rick announced that he was leaving McLaren, there was a lot of interviews that were just, oh my god, like, how many times is this poor guy gonna have to explain himself? But now they've been asking, like, did you know that Piastri signed in July? And he's like, obviously not, like, or else he probably wouldn't have posted that Instagram, you know,
That
like
the full text post.
Yeah.
We had a full debrief about it on the podcast. Like, of course the man didn't know. He's not a psychopath. He's not posting that after he knows to stay with the bit. Like, absolutely not.
No.
Well, and I'd like to follow up to my earlier comment. You know, I know we had a discussion about how the long text Instagram posts typically dominated by girls who've been cheated on, right? And also Danny Rick. And I feel like this is one of those things about, okay, the couple breaks up and he gets with the other girl, the one he told you not to worry about. Like, you know what I mean? Danny Rick's out here being like, we're still a team. I love McLaren. I'm here for it. And McLaren's like, newer, hotter, younger update. He's straight up, McLaren is Leo.
Is he
Leo DiCaprioing him right now. Like, Danny's past 25 has to be dropped, you know?
oh my god,
I feel like,
you're not wrong.
what, how old's Lando? Like 23?
Yeah,
24? I don't know.
he's pretty young.
Yeah.
Oscar is fucking 18.
A little bit younger even, than Lando.
No, honestly, he's probably not 18. He's probably, what, 19 or 20? But, like, he is fully in Leonardo DiCaprio's range.
Oh.
I mean, it had to be said. It had to be said, right? Like, Danny's, what, 30-something?
Yeah.
Leo wouldn't go for it. Neither will McLaren.
I mean, we called the bet completely on it to a T. It absolutely was almost like they cheated on him a little bit, and
I mean, they did. Back in July, they went out on him, and now...
Yeah.
Now it all came to the surface. Everyone knows.
I mean, like, I don't think Piastri's hotter, but, like, clearly McLaren does.
I still think it's an interesting play for them, personally. I'm not saying that they didn't need to shake things up. I just think it's interesting how they went about it.
I mean, I think it's smart. Piastri seems like a good driver, to be fair. Like, he won in F3 and F2, which I think only Leclerc and maybe Russell have done.
Well,
Okay.
I also
So-
feel like this follows their brand. Like, they bet a lot on Lando.
Yeah.
And Lando's young, very talented, very promising, but a lot of their strategy rests on, like, young, up-and-coming drivers. And so I feel like maybe they took the gamble with Danny and they realized it wasn't playing out how they liked. And so they basically said, instead of, Jack, I apologize, rehabilitating like a late stage driver, they'd rather like nurture a new one.
I get play. I'm not saying
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they should have stuck with him. Absolutely not. I just think it's really interesting that you're putting eggs in a basket of another promising driver when Lando hasn't necessarily delivered either.
I disagree. I think Lando has completely delivered.
Well,
He just doesn't have a car.
No.
I mean, you still see him up there.
yeah, but he hasn't won a race.
He hasn't run a race yet.
Even when he had the
But
car.
he definitely could have won a race if they didn't give it
Won.
to Danny Rick. But otherwise, I mean, like, it's the car, not necessarily him as a driver. Because you don't see McLaren's up there at all.
But you also don't see him on podium.
Yeah, I still think it's a car.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Lando. I think Lando's incredibly
Why am I
talented.
defending McLaren
Yeah,
right now?
right?
And Jack is like, fuck Lando Norris.
I mean,
No, I just feel like there have been
I've
some.
never been a huge Lando fan. Like I've been
That's
a
true.
Lando
Yeah.
fan because he's on the team, and I'm not saying that Lando.
You were
doesn't
always
have
a Danny
good
Rick fan.
career ahead of him. I just think you're adding more risk. Maybe it pays off. Not saying that they shouldn't have switched it up. I just think that like having two drivers on the team that are still very much so, well, I don't know. How long has been Lando?
Lando's been in F1 now for a couple of years.
Yeah,
He's
what,
no longer
4,
a rookie.
maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's
We'll see.
one of the top 5 highest paid drivers. You can refer back to one of our earlier episodes where we break down the cost caps to hear exactly where Lando is in the lineup. But yeah, he's definitely not a spring chicken.
I'm going to leave that one and move on now to the empty seats we have open, because this leaves an Alpine seat open, which the other F1 gossip is that Alpine is heavily recruiting Pierre Gasly for.
Well, that's not too surprising, only because I feel like Pierre has been part of the Red Bull Academy for a couple years. He performed, people would say, really well on, what was it at that point, Toro Rosso? Got promoted to Red Bull. Obviously, there was the very dramatic incident where his Red Bull career quickly came to a close. He was demoted to what is now AlphaTauri, basically. Part of that was like the same weekend that he lost a friend, and it was just a very overwhelming weekend, I'm sure, in general. But I feel like he has performed so well at AlphaTauri last year, I would say. I think this year has honestly been a little disappointing for Pierre, and I feel like, I don't know if it's the car. I'm honestly not sure, because I think Tsunoda has been generating better results, which I know you're a big Yuki fan, but like, I kind of always expect Gasly to come out on top.
Sure.
And when he doesn't, I feel like I'm a little disappointed in him. And maybe he's just hitting that point where it's just not working as a Red Bull driver on AlphaTauri. I know that could be a little confusing for listeners who are newer. He's not actually on Red Bull AlphaTauri. But regardless, maybe he just needs to get away from that, like, structure and try a new type of team. And I think that maybe Alpine could be a good fit for him.
And I think mainly it's because, like, there's no promotion for him to Red Bull.
Yeah,
He's not going to go back. Yeah.
He's been, especially even last year, he was like, I deserve this seat. Like, Checo doesn't. Went on and on. Obviously, he's not going to be taking Max's seat.
Well, and Checo's been re-signed, and Helmut Marko basically told Pierre to sit down.
Yeah, he was like, simmer down, child.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
So I think
he's going to be looking.
Time. He needs to. If he's not going to
Spread
make it
his
up
wings.
to the if he's not going to make it up to the Red Bull team, he's got to do something else. Which I think it looks like it's going to be Alpine, which is interesting because Ocon has come out and said that he wants Mick as his teammate, because also Schumacher's contract with Ferrari as like the Ferrari driver academy is coming to an end.
Well, I feel like Ocon wants that because Ocon wants to be solidly the top driver, like with no questions.
Okay.
And I almost feel like he could be, especially after this season. I mean, he's doing very well.
Well, and especially if he gets Mick, right? Like,
Yeah.
Mick is still, it's his second season in F1 right now. Like, he's no longer a rookie, but he's very clearly a junior driver. And switching to a brand new team, like, it would be a dynamic, I think, where Esteban would obviously be the number one driver for Alpine and Mick would be the second driver. Where I feel like if Gasly moves over, it's not as clear cut, you know?
Yeah.
True. Very true.
I feel like their experiences are much more comparable and they're at a similar level where you could have a lot of drama. And I also kind of love it because Gasly's French, Ocon's French, and Alpine is French. I want a full French team.
Didn't think of it that way.
And I want them to fight it out. Honestly, I'm here for it.
I think that's how it's going to be. And if I were placing bets, I would still put bets on Gasly.
I kind of think so too. I mean, I think he's had a tough season, but also, like, to put it in perspective too, I think AlphaTauri as a whole has had a tough season. I don't think Yuki has been doing so much better than Pierre, and I think almost at times, like, I don't even know what Yuki's been doing. It's hard to watch Yuki sometimes. Like, last year, sure. But this year, I'm almost like, what is going on?
Well, and I think today was a good example of that. We'll get into it later, but
I would be here for that. I think that would be a smart move for Alpine. I know there's, like, other rumors that because there is an open seat that Danny Rick might move back to Alpine. I don't think that's going to be the case.
The other rumor around the grid this past week has been Danny Rick might be moving as a reserve driver for Mercedes.
honestly, given his options, when you look at who has open seats and you look at the makeup of the grid, I guess, and most likely twos, I don't think that's a bad option for him.
They said they want to do it for him to, like, build his confidence, get back up, and...
Well, and I think that's kind of what I was going to say is, like, he has had a tough couple of years. Not only just on McLaren, but honestly, since he left Red Bull. Like, the Renault years, which now Alpine for our newer listeners, he did okay. He didn't do great. And I think that having him in a program with as much structure as Mercedes, good technology, like I know Mercedes isn't necessarily one of the top teams this year, but I mean, look at the results.
Historically has been.
Yeah, no, they've been on the podium.
Team.
They're very competitive. I think it's an environment that might be good for him at this point in his career. I would still be sad to see him as a reserve driver and not like a permanent spot on the grid. But I think overall, from a team structure and culture standpoint, it might be what he needs.
See, I want to see him go back and take that AlphaTauri seat.
You want him on AlphaTauri?
Yeah. I want to see him back in a Red Bull car.
I don't think, strictly from a pride standpoint, no way. No way.
Same thing with Alpine. I think he would see it in his mind as a step backward, even though I don't think that's the case.
But what?
No, but it is. Like, he used to be teammates with Max in equal Red Bull machinery. So to take a step to Red Bull's junior team,
that would be so...
I think he would rather take a reserve driver at Mercedes.
He's taken steps back in his career since he left Red Bull.
I mean...
You can run back our old episodes. I straight up said that and Jack got mad at me. Like,
I mean, okay, here...
So, like, how is a reserve driver not any more of a step back than taking an AlphaTauri seat?
I think the only thing that saves his ego is it's a new team.
I don't think he will leave the grid. I think he will go to Mercedes if it is his only option as a reserve driver. I do not think he will leave the grid.
Okay, here's a hot take, Jack. How do you feel about the possibility of him ending up at Haas?
I honestly think that would be amazing.
See, Jack is backing the Haas train.
I have always been backing the Haas train.
Have you?
Yes.
Did you listen to last episode?
Selfishly, as a supporter, I would like to see him racing over a reserve seat.
You just want him on an American team.
I think it would be good. Okay. Hey, I'm just saying it makes sense from like his brand.
It does. It does, kinda.
Are they going to pay him? They can't pay him that much money. So maybe it does come down to money, and like if Mercedes as a reserve driver is going to pay him more, maybe he does that for a year. We'll see. But I feel like the brand deals with Haas as an American team. Oh,
he might
yes.
do it, like, strictly
Absolutely.
from, like, because he plays very well with the American fan base.
That was my entire...
You know what? I'm warming up to this idea.
I think he plays well.
I don't love it, but...
A lot of Americans support him.
Frozen. KP is frozen
Iced.
on DR to Haas.
Steiner and him together, hysterical. That would be amazing.
Not gonna lie, the meme potential.
I think there's a lot of, obviously, because he's such a very supported driver, understand he's had a rough couple of years. I think there has been a lot of conversation around where he's going to go, so it's hard to say which is actually a serious avenue versus people just speculating. But I think ultimately I hope to still see him in F1. I think one speculation was that he's going to IndyCar. I really hope that he stays in F1. If that means he has to be a reserve driver, I will take that over no Danny Rick.
So speaking of IndyCar, there was another driver in the mix for McLaren, and it was Colton.
It was an American.
Yeah.
An American IndyCar driver. Mm-hmm. I'm blanking on his last name.
Yeah, I think, so his issue is he doesn't have enough points to get a super license for F1 because IndyCar races don't count as many, like, they don't have as many points associated with them as like an F2 or an F3 might have. So that was the main issue, and I think that they're looking into changing the regulations for it.
Yeah.
Even though IndyCar isn't really a feeder into F1, nor is it supposed to be, but it should have equivalent points assigned to it, because I think IndyCar is even more of a comparable to F1 than anything else. So we'll see if he gets to make it, even as like a reserve driver.
I would like that. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, I think it'd be really fun. I would love to cheer for an American driver.
Absolutely.
The last thing I'll say on this too is, like, for reserve drivers as they go, Piastri was the reserve driver for Alpine, obviously, but he was shared and I don't think that we covered that before. I think McLaren and there's one other team that shared him as the reserve driver. So he's being paid by Alpine. So it is still kind of a slap in the face to Alpine with how he approached the situation.
Still very immature.
But he also did have those connections, which I think is why it wasn't necessarily out of the blue that he went to McLaren.
Makes a little more sense.
No, that's a lot of good context because honestly, the whole and we can get into it, Jack, when we lobby you for what teams we think you should support in the future. But it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth the way he went about it. And I don't know much about Piastri, but that's really good context. I feel like it really brings things into perspective.
But it did leave a bad taste in a lot of teams' mouth.
Fair.
I think even Toto and Christian Horner both came out and said that it was not the appropriate way to handle that situation, which those are pretty big teams to be speaking out on one single reserve driver's career. So I don't know where he goes from this, and hopefully he can just fly under the radar and kind of build up his own career from here. But it's not starting on a good start.
Yeah, like I feel like the F1 community is small. Everyone knows each other, everyone talks. So this is not how I would want to enter it if I were him. Just knowing, like, even as we've talked about, all of the other drivers, their movements between teams, how many teams they've been on, their different relationships among teams, like, it's a small world. Don't pee in your pool.
Well, yeah, don't burn a bridge publicly if you don't have to. And so publicly in, like, a very...
Or privately, like, it's a small world.
Obviously, if he's going to make the move to McLaren, you're kind of burning a bridge in a sense, but, like, you can handle it in a way that it's like, okay, everyone kind of understands. But the way that he went about it was just...
Yeah, he didn't have to come out on social media and do that. No. I mean, he has managers that can handle that situation for him. It didn't need to be something that he typed up and posted on Instagram or Twitter or whatever it was.
And we've talked about that. We've talked about how one of the things that's kind of nice about F1 is, like, yes, there's a lot of young men who earn a lot of money. And I think if you look at other sports where that's the case, you can see a lot of social media or PR, like, missteps. And I think the PR, social media, just general game in F1, it's on another level. And I think that's one of the things we've always really respected about the sport. I don't know what PR girly is working overtime to, like, keep these men in check sometimes. From the outside, a lot of stuff gets smoothed over.
And they have to do a lot of training, these drivers, I think, to go through all the PR, because the press is, like, pretty aggressive. Some of the most aggressive questions I've ever heard being asked. And most of the drivers can handle it pretty well. Some could do better than others, but pretty well all around.
Yeah, so I think it's up in the air right now for me, at least, on what I'm going to do for next year. Obviously, want to see where Danny Rick goes, but I'm not completely sold on supporting McLaren next year.
Spicy.
A little bit spicy, I know. We've had a lot of conversation about just what's going on in the F1 community this episode, so I think next week, if you could, ladies, prepare for me a pitch on who I should support next year, whether it's your teams, whether it's I should stick with McLaren, or maybe whether it's I support someone else. So I think just mull on that.
Like, what do you mean by pitch?
I want, like, a very structured argument for what team I should go with next year.
Okay.
I do have one hot take on this, and it's more personally. If Red Bull continues the complete domination that I've seen,
shut the fuck up.
Over the past
Literally, you're so annoying.
Who let this girl in here?
Okay.
Why do we invite her back to
Anyway,
record?
long story short, your question, no, we're not hearing it.
No, I think I want to adopt another team.
Oh.
Okay. Oh, my team's just, like, so good. I need to pick an underdog.
I think so, yeah.
You're like, wow, I have the prize-winning Westminster #1 dog. I
need to pick up a stray.
I'm going to go to the pound.
I don't even know
Who's got the most fleas? Okay, it's Williams, #1. You can have them.
Oh, I was going to stay within the family. I was just going to pick up AlphaTauri.
Absolutely. That's not even fair. That's not like us fucking Stray.
It kind of is. They're lower midfield. I'm not going to pick the bottom of the barrel.
That's just like an old dog that's been at home that's like not going to like be the number one champ at the dog park, but like it's not quite like on its last leg.
You can switch from a dog analogy to something else.
No.
All right, so in the meantime, do you guys want to recap some practice qualifying for this race?
Let's do it.
It was an interesting weekend.
It was.
Definitely. I would like to say I did not watch practice, but I watched qualifying.
Yeah.
And qualifying was a little spicy. First and foremost, I'd like to address the elephant in the room with qualifying, and that's the fans.
Oh, yeah.
As an American, myself, I'm just shocked that we have not been the problem fans yet.
True.
Like, the fact that the Dutch fans, I know that this is Max's home race. I know that, you know, Super Max, it's the big thing. The whole little Dutch community, they're all wearing orange. They're the problem children of F1 right now. And I'm just so happy it's not the Americans. Like, so the big issue, especially in qualifying, and apologies for jumping straight to quali, they shot off flares on the track and had to have the session red flagged. Thank goodness Albon was the only car on the track and was able to avoid it. There wasn't any like actual issue in terms of a driver being hit or like anything catastrophic, but in quali, like your lap matters, right? Your tire choice for the lap matters. And so, you know, they were talking about how like that really messed up Williams' strategy. And so from a race perspective, like the fans are genuinely interfering with the weekend. And selfishly, I'm just so glad it wasn't the American fans. Like, that's our brand, and it wasn't us. It's the Dutch people this time.
Yeah, I feel like even the Dutch fans got in a fight over it. I know I saw, like, ESPN have a photo of them, like, fighting in the stands because of the flares that were thrown on the track. And immediately the commentators...
Like a brawl?
Yeah. Immediately the commentators were pretty aggressive about whoever threw it should be, like, kicked out of the stands and... I mean, yeah, they definitely should.
Well, they were saying that, like, at least from the commentator's perspective, the rules around flares were not consistent.
Oh.
And so they were saying that flares were not actually banned at the beginning of the weekend. Granted, I think they'll be banned going forward, but basically what they said was they were fully relying on fans to self-surrender flares into bins at the circuit. Nobody was being searched. Like, there was no sort of, I'm going through some metal detector, which, ladies, correct me if I'm wrong, and I know we'll get into this on our Austin episode, but I think we went through metal detectors at COTA.
Oh, absolutely we did.
Yeah.
And you were also in the U.S.
Yeah, so, like, again, very American thing here. Like, I'm just so used to being searched and, like, no one ever trusting me that when they're just like, hey, Dutch fans, if you have pyrotechnics, please leave them in this bin. In my mind, I'm like, there's no way. And clearly, I feel like some of the fans proved me right in that they continued. I think they basically said, like, we're done with the flares, don't set them off.
I think, like, other than the mishaps in qualifying alone was kind of stressful. At least, like, Q1 for me... Max went out, Leclerc went out, and they both set flying laps. Then they kind of just like, okay, we're done. We've kind of done our thing. Then all the cars went out at once, which was so stressful because there was like 3 minutes left, less than 3 minutes left. Every single car went out trying to get a flying lap. And that, you just know, like there are going to be some cars that have traffic issues or, you know, something happens and they can't get a good flying lap in, and I think that's definitely what happened in Q1. But we also saw Yuki just shoot up to the top, which was unbelievable.
I was impressed.
Great for Yuki. This is what I wanted to see all season. I mean, I'm glad it's finally happening. Those anger management classes, they're paying off.
As long as he channels it, right? Like, I'm glad to see that energy channeled.
Yeah, I would say the one other surprising thing in Q1 too was Sainz. He almost dropped out in Q1.
Yeah. Oh, I was terrified. I was watching that and I was like, no. don't do this to me, partially because I forgot to reset my fantasy lineup. I had him as my turbo driver. Like, I'm already a Ferrari fan. I can't take the double whammy.
Otherwise, I think Q2 went off how I assume it would.
I will just note, I know you ladies mentioned it last week, that Bottas officially killed his streak of making it past Q1. Still a bummer to see him go out in Q1 this week. Like, the man went however many 100-plus races into at least Q2, you know?
I think it's the car.
It's the car.
It's for sure the car.
This race, but
like it's still heartbreaking, but it's like it's definitely the car.
Oh, and I don't think that's like a Bottas thing. I just think it's like once the streak was broken, it probably did ease up a lot of pressure where so many of the other Q2 appearances he had were like by a hair.
Yeah.
I feel like it was him purely trying to extend that streak, and it's done.
Yeah.
You can tell.
I'm not sure if there's anything too much of note in Q2.
I think there were some close calls getting into Q3, and I think one of the notable ones was Mick Schumacher. And I know that obviously he's under a lot of pressure at Haas right now. Contract talks, as we've mentioned a lot at the beginning of the episode, are pretty hot, and one of the things he's heard from the team there was he needs to show up. And I think getting a Q3 appearance in the Haas this weekend was a pretty good step in the right direction in terms of him maintaining his seat at Haas if that's what he wants.
Right. I think the only other thing was the fact that Leclerc could have gotten pole in his qualifying lap in Q3. He just messed up one corner, and I think that just kind of put him off for the whole...
Well, I think in Q3, too, you know, we had a lot of good laps, right? So Max set the pace, and then Leclerc came through and breezed past it. Again, a couple more really, really great laps from other people. Max goes to defend his lap. Max gets the lap in. Max gets the time in. And then, Catherine, you want to fill us in? What happened at Team Red Bull in Q3?
Like you were fully setting this up to be a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory.
Tinfoil.
Yes, tinfoil. Because Checo spun out on his flying lap and red flagged the session, which pretty much fully ended qualifying.
And not pretty much, literally ended.
Yeah. So the remaining drivers couldn't get a flying lap in. Although Max and Leclerc and Sainz were not going to put in their flying lap, it mainly affected Mercedes.
I was going to say, straight up, as a Ferrari fan, I agree. I know that Sainz and Leclerc already had their laps in, but the Mercedes were looking pretty good. They were looking pretty good. I'm not full tinfoil. I'm just saying.
It felt a little But I think we can probably segue into recapping the actual race.
Well, let's read the standings. We did have 2 DNFs here. Finishing last was Yuki Tsunoda from AlphaTauri, closely followed by another DNF of Valtteri Bottas from Alfa Romeo. And in 18th place from Williams, we have Nicholas Latifi. In 17th from McLaren, we have Daniel Ricciardo.
Jeez, I didn't realize he finished that low.
It's a tough one, tough to swallow. In 16th from Alfa Romeo, we have Zhou Guanyu. In 15th from Haas, we have Kevin Magnussen. In 14th from Aston Martin, Sebastian Vettel. In 13th from Haas, we have Mick Schumacher. In 12th from Williams, we have Alexander Albon. In 11th from AlphaTauri, we have Pierre Gasly. And now into our points positions. From Aston Martin, we have Lance Stroll in 10th. From Alpine, we have Esteban Ocon in 9th. And unfortunately, in 8th, we have Carlos Sainz from Ferrari. Another tough one we'll recap. In 7th, we have Lando Norris from McLaren. In 6th, Fernando Alonso from Alpine. In 5th place, we have Sergio Perez, a.k.a. Checo, from Red Bull. In 4th place, Lewis Hamilton from Mercedes. And for our podium finishers, we have Charles Leclerc with Ferrari in 3rd, George Russell with Mercedes in 2nd, and our race winner of the Dutch Grand Prix, his home Grand Prix. And no surprise to anyone at this table, but I'm still salty about it. In first place from Red Bull Racing, we have Max Verstappen. We have a lot of F1 fans in our lives, and I feel like as a result of doing this podcast, we have gained more F1 lovers. We've introduced a lot of people to the sport. Love to see it. We're absolutely here for it. One unfortunate downside of introducing a lot of people you love to a fun sport that happens to air at like 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings is sometimes the people you love send you spoilers. And as a salty little gal over here, my mom straight up told me that Max won before I even watched the race. But to be fair, the reason I'm salty about that is it's not even that big of a surprise. The man is pulling away as the leader of the championship. I'll fully acknowledge that. Regardless, let's get into the race. Because it wasn't always 100% clear he was going to win. There were a couple of places where he may have lost it. Not very many, to be fair, but regardless.
I think the one thing to note on this race, too, is that the commentators even said the only way for Leclerc to be close to the running now for the championship is if Max DNFs.
Yeah, straight up.
Which is like a ton of, like a gust out of the sails of Leclerc because he can no longer rely on just his own talent, his own driving. He has to literally rely on someone else failing.
Luck. It's luck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. To be in the running.
Yeah.
I think some of my biggest takeaways from the race, outside of the obvious that we already stated, Perez. That was just, I feel like he had a lot of instances where it wasn't like a stellar performance from him today.
I know that they're running different configurations on his car versus Max's.
Gotcha.
But I'm still surprised by the difference between the performance.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think they would be configuring a car more to Perez's likeness and driving style.
Well, maybe they're at the point in the championship where they know Max is far enough ahead that they're almost just like using Perez's car as a test car.
And they are. I mean, we saw him go out on a different tire compound to kind of test it, the hards, before Max went out. But I would still think that they want to see him get high up in the points, even though the constructors is solidly in hand as well.
Sorry, it's just like the way you said it.
No, it's fair because
it's just hard to hear.
You know what? Let's address the elephant in the room, right? The only other contender, especially at this point in the season, was my team, the goddamn clown car. And we can talk about it because Carlos Sainz pit stop, 12 and a half seconds. The tire wasn't even there.
That was atrocious.
And then they throw the tire gun just willy-nilly. Perez ran over the tire gun.
Yeah, thank God he didn't have any serious damage to his car from that.
I don't think anything actually happened.
I'm surprised, one, he didn't get a penalty for that. Yeah. And two, we haven't heard about his other penalty where he was passing, I believe it was an Alpine.
Yes.
Under a yellow flag. By a stopped car on the track. You could clearly see that there was a stopped car.
There were so many missteps. Honestly, it's hard to recount them for this recap because also we had an unsafe release.
Yeah,
which
we had
multiple
penalties, and we saw that one take place kind of honestly immediately after the race results were done. That's why he was so far down in terms of results. Was not necessarily his finishing place on the grid, but the unsafe release in the pit stop. And then you add them throwing the wheel gun out there, which I don't think anybody actually got penalized for. You add the whole yellow flag. I would not be surprised if Sainz continued to drop in the ranks in this race in terms of additional post-race penalties.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And for what? For what?
It's
Why?
another Team Ferrari issue. It's not Sainz. I mean,
no.
Sainz maybe the yellow flag, passing under a yellow flag, fine. But that's the only one he can take responsibility for. And even then, I'll kind of give him a pass. Maybe, it happened pretty quickly.
Well, you're going so fast, right? Did you see it? You're also really reliant on your engineer to tell you things. Is the team communicating well? Again, not giving Sainz a full pass, but you're going, 200 miles an hour? Okay, you didn't see it. You should have backup. You should not be driving out on your own. And that's the huge issue with Ferrari. Is the team themselves. We talked about this during the race. They're so negative on the radio too. And I understand there have been times where I feel like both Sainz and Leclerc have almost shot themselves in the foot because they didn't fully believe in themselves, right? Like, they didn't push themselves to the point they could have, or they kind of, like, buckled under pressure. But when you have a team that doesn't back you up and you don't have a team you can solidly rely on, I kind of understand why drivers act that way, you know?
Yeah. That was, I mean, the Ferrari team calls were bad. I want to say almost the Mercedes team calls were not great.
Mm-hmm.
I know we saw it in the last couple laps. So, like, it was a pretty boring race overall. Max started from first, held first throughout most of the race. There were a couple of different pit stops we thought might change things up. I think the only super interesting laps were, like, the last 12, 15.
Yeah, probably.
Because there's a safety car, because Yuki stopped, which we should quickly recap what happened with Yuki because...
Well, it wasn't even Yuki stop that brought out the actual safety car.
It was Bottas.
Yeah, our
right.
2 DNFs. But the Yuki one was just bizarre, so I definitely think we should talk through that. I mean...
Yeah, he, like, pulled over to the side.
Right after the pit.
Right after he pitted, and then they brought him back. He was able to go back into the pit, and they were, like, playing with something around his steering wheel for a little while. They sent him back out, and then ultimately he ended up having to retire.
Well, it was just bizarre because, like, there was a yellow flag initially, and we were expecting, like, okay, a VSC, an actual safety car, what have you, and there was nothing.
And he could go back out on track.
Yeah, and
the car was still functioning.
It was green flagged.
Right.
He just, like, pulled over, which was weird. And then for him to go back into the pits, come back out. Did he get, like, airlifted out? I can't remember. Or did he drive out of the second one with the yellow flag? I'm blanking because Yuki pulled off twice and created 2 yellow flags that I can't remember if there was a legit safety car to get him out. I know he green flagged it after the first one, but Bottas then ran into mechanical issues and there was a virtual safety car.
A full safety car, I believe.
And then Bottas, like, had actual mechanical issues and there was a full safety car. I think part of it was where he was on the track too. Like, he was on the straightaway basically right past the point you would divert to the pits. That's where Bottas unfortunately retired, and so they had to have a genuine safety car to come get him.
Yeah. And I think that caused a lot of the different pit stop strategies, the grid bunched up, and that's where we saw some of the Mercedes drama because actually Russell made the call to say, hey, I want to come in, I want to get softs. And he did. And that gave him the jump on Hamilton when they came out because I think it was Hamilton, Verstappen, Russell. Hamilton was out on track, but Verstappen and Russell both came in and got softs. So, and that was completely Russell's call. And then when the safety car ended, they had better tires because Hamilton was out there on worn mediums.
Well, and I can understand, you know, we've seen this and the commentators even said it. They were like, oh, is this flashbacks to Abu Dhabi? Like, Hamilton doesn't want to give up track position. Verstappen comes in clearly with a superior pit stop strategy. Like, obviously this race is not comparable to Abu Dhabi. Like, we'll call that out right now. But it is kind of a funny, like, comparison of Hamilton in first, Verstappen diving into the pits for a new tire, and Hamilton thinking he can pull it off. But I don't actually think he could hold up Verstappen, but I do think he thought he could hold up Russell.
Well, I don't know that he even knew that it was an option. Like, his engineer should have brought him in. Russell made the call to go get softs, and that's why he was able to pass Hamilton in the end, which was, like, a pretty dramatic passing because...
Those radio messages?
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Hamilton was not happy.
Like, half of them are bleeped out.
Yeah, I don't think we've heard
a lot
him
from
cuss the radio in a long time. Usually it's, like, sad Hamilton where he's like, guys... Like, I can't believe this is happening. But he was, like, dropping F-bombs, like...
Yeah, like, you could tell just by the number of asterisks on screen what was actually being said. Not his classiest moment.
No. But it ended up opening the door for Russell to have his best ever finish in Formula One, which was second.
Yeah.
And we still saw Leclerc on the podium.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Which I think he kind of needed.
Yeah, he did need that.
Ferrari, not the greatest in terms of
another race, and I don't know how many times we have to say this, another race where Ferrari's strategy, subpar.
I think that's being kind.
Yeah.
I think subpar is kind.
Very generous.
And I don't know what the drivers... You have 2 good drivers. Like, I don't know what else they're supposed to do.
Well, I guess we'll find out as the rest of the season unfolds. We'll see if they can move it forward or if the circus will continue.
Yeah, I'd like to see your pitch to Jack on next episode.
It's going to be interesting. Stay tuned. I'm sure it'll be spicy.
I'm curious myself. I can't wait, ladies.
So thanks for listening to this episode. You can find us at gridgals.com, which has links to all of our social media. And go ahead and like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
And that's the checkered flag for this session. We'll see you back on the grid next week.